Senate Democrats have filed legislation that would block the U.S. from attacking Cuba without congressional approval. It's from Senators Tim Kaine, Ruben Gallego, and Adam Schiff, who filed the War Powers resolution yesterday. It could be potentially voted on by the end of the month. Democrats have used this tactic of War Powers resolutions repeatedly to force debate on President Trump's foreign military actions. So far, they've not been successful in passing any of them. Earlier this week, Trump said Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in talks with Cuban leadership, saying, quote, "It may be a friendly takeover. It may not be a friendly takeover," adding he and Rubio would focus on the island nation after the war with Iran. The conflicts are just piling up for a president that was pretty non-interventionist on the campaign trail. Want to bring in our panel to end the week. Democratic strategist and chief communications officer of Move On, Joel Payne. Also with us, Annalise Keller. She's the former communications director for Republican Senator Cory Gardner. Guys, absolutely great to have you to end the week here. I think, Joel, it's been fascinating to watch Democrats try to force these votes repeatedly on conflicts that both the president is actively forecasting, actively doing, or not yet moving on, but there's a general sense that he might in the future. And yet, what does it say that none of them have passed? Is the point still getting across?
Well, I think the point to the Democratic base is getting across that Democrats are, by and large, pretty united. And I think you do have to get Republicans on the record. Look, these are consequential votes, whether it's now or in the future. These are votes that are not going to age well for Republicans. And if I was a Republican, I'd be really nervous about following Donald Trump down a dark alley on Cuba. I'd be really nervous about cutting a blank check to Donald Trump for Iran. These things not only excite the Democratic base, but we actually think that they turn off people in the middle, turn off independents. So I think you're going to continue to see Democrats do that. And I think you're going to continue to see Republicans try to find ways to actually create a little bit of distance from Donald Trump, even if they don't break with him on votes like this. Yeah. I think rhetorically they're starting to break with him.
I think that's interesting and maybe something we can watch. I think the other part of this, too, is as I've been considering what we're watching through the Trump administration, it feels very much like the Rubio worldview put into action. Venezuela, Cuba, Iran. As someone who knows the Senate so well and knows the role that Rubio carved for himself there, serving for more than a decade, do you think this helps Republican senators stay on board, following him down a dark alley, as Joel said, even though they haven't really explained the goals in these conflicts in the way that Republican senators even need answers to?
I do think that Marco Rubio has given a lot of Senate Republicans comfort with what the administration is doing. It's also been interesting to watch his worldview take over the administration. Yes. When you look at someone like Vice President Vance, who has been somewhat quiet around Iran. I mean, he did a couple of TV interviews, but sort of that wing of the party and the J.D. Vances have really gotten rolled by Secretary Rubio in terms of the military action that I suspect J.D. Vance is a little bit more uncomfortable with.
Is that a schism worth exploring? Do you think that it extends beyond the immediate conflicts that the president is doing in Iran, what he might do in Cuba? It feels anathema to the America First agenda that Trump himself put forward and that J.D. Vance clearly bought into.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching. I mean, I don't think that there is a schism between the vice president and the president right now. And I also think what's interesting is a lot of this is happening in Washington, where everyone who identifies as a Republican in Washington ascribes a little bit more to the Rubio view. There are exceptions to that. But I think if you were to go out further when we talk about presidential 2028, I don't think that we can say Vice President Vance isn't actually going to be the more popular position of, your voter Republican.
I think that's interesting, especially because the way the America First agenda was presented was one that would focus on Americans here at home, not money and blood and treasure being sent overseas, as we've seen the president increasingly focus. And I think it sort of brings us back to the immediate term of the midterms. We got to get there before we hit 2028. And the way that Republicans seem to be straying from affordability issues. And I wonder if you think that Democrats are doing anything to fill that gap other than reminding Americans, hey, your prices are higher, or maybe that's enough.
I think right now the job is accountability for Republicans. And look, they're making it easy. I mean, you guys were just talking about the Rubio worldview. How about Lindsey Graham, who's, wearing, Trump 2028 hats and acting like the town crier on TV segments, talking about we're going to storm through the world and take out all the bad guys. That's not what people voted for. And I think putting that in front of voters, that is an unpopular worldview, and that's an unpopular organizing principle for MAGA that I think a lot of MAGA is going to get away from. In terms of Democrats, look, I think what Donald Trump has actually done for Democrats, he's put the Senate in play. I mean, if you're Dan Sullivan in Alaska, if you're John Husted in Ohio, those are seats that I think felt safer 3 months ago. They feel much less safe now. And I imagine part of what John Thune's thinking here is I need to get caught trying on something like the SAVE Act, but not try hard enough to actually push away more voters in the middle.
Because what Max Cohen from Punchbowl and I were just talking about is that on the Save America Act, as they're calling it, it might not actually help Republicans earn more votes. In fact, the concern with it is that it limits people who have the right things that they need to vote. They are citizens, they have ID, but maybe not the right kind of ID. There's a concern specifically around married women who have changed their last name and might not have the proof of showing at each turn who they are based on changing their last name to their spouses, right? So, I mean, there is a concern among some Republicans. It doesn't have full Republican support in the Senate. Wide, but not full. So what does that tell you about the bill itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually the bigger issue, or one of the bigger issues that's been bubbling up that Trump has put into this mix that is different than what was passed in the House version is this mail-in ballot issue. Because a lot of these states that have voted by mail for years and years, and these senators are in tough re-elections, and they're looking at this like, I now kind of have to be on the record and say, I don't want to break from Donald Trump, but now this is not something that, I really am super comfortable with. So I think that's one area to watch. Now, Majority Leader Thune has a real struggle on his hands. I like the way you put that. He has to get caught trying. But he is going to try, but it is going to be really difficult. There are not the votes there for this measure, and Donald Trump has made it clear that this is his top priority, not some of these affordability messages. This is what he wants to do.
If they dare, by the way, try to pass the SAVE Act, that'll be a nice turnout machine for Democrats. You want to fire up a lot of Democratic-based voters, go tell them that you're going after their voting rights. You're gonna have every Democrat in this country talking about how their voters need to go and over-prepare for the 2026 and 2028 elections. I think there's a lot of knock-on effects that Republicans might not be thinking about.
I also think it's when Trump says, I'm not going to pass any other piece of legislation, and a massive bipartisan housing package moves through the Senate. The House has their own concerns on that. Reportedly, they don't feel heard. Their provisions have not been included. But that's actually a huge issue. In every state that I've traveled to over the last 5 years, local elections hinge on housing concerns.
Yes, they hinge on housing concerns. Also, right now, we are entering the first week where TSA agents aren't getting paid. So is Donald Trump not going to go and sign a bill to, if they're able to, split up the DHS bill and pass TSA first while they continue to fight over DHS? Is Donald Trump not going to support that? That's not gonna wear well. And I think Donald Trump and Republicans are very excited about kind of picking these fights, but they actually don't know how to land them. He doesn't know how to land them internationally, and he certainly doesn't seem like he knows how to land them domestically.
I also do think, and this has loomed over, Trump's crusade against mail-in voting for the last 8+ years, Republicans actually used to do well by mail-in voting before they started sort of muddying the waters around how good of a way it was to vote. It just seems, again, kind of counterintuitive. You should be trying to get people to vote in every way possible that they legally can. Both parties should. And yet, it's just sort of confusing to me to watch it continue to play out.